up, friends? My name is Jess. For those of you who are familiar with my channel, first of all, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. But you're also probably aware that I took the longest hiatus from posting videos. I first started posting videos on this channel in 2020 up until I want to say 2022, and then I stopped posting videos until the beginning of this year. But while I stopped posting videos for a while, I of course did not stop reading good books, and it would be such a bummer to not mention any of the good books that I read in between 2022 through 2024. 2025 is covered. So for this video, I have picked out my 5 most favorite books from those couple of years, just so they can have their well-earned moment. We're going to start with the earliest one that I've read up until the most recent, so we're starting with Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko. Vita Nostra was originally written in Ukrainian and then translated by Julia Matov-Hersey, and I absolutely want to give this translator a shout out. Translators always deserve credit for their hard work, but oh my god, Julia deserves a medal. This book had to have been hard to understand in her native language, let alone understanding it well enough to translate it into another one. Vita Nostra is a speculative novel following this teen girl named Sasha. During vacation, she crosses paths with this strange and sinister man who compels her to do tasks in exchange for gold coins and in order to avoid consequences. At the end of the summer, this man coerces Sasha into attending a school in a remote village, and I mean, it's just strange. The school and the lessons taught within it are so impossible to grasp that it drives its students insane trying to understand what they're even trying to learn in the first place. But the students, including Sasha, remain at the school and they try their best to excel at lessons, even while these lessons start fundamentally changing them, because to leave would put their families at risk. I gave Vita Nostra 3 stars, which sounds like it wouldn't be a top 5 book over a course of 2 years, right? Except I still think about this book semi-regularly, honestly. I think I mostly gave it 3 stars when I first read it because I struggled to process how I even felt about it for a long time afterwards. And I don't really change my star ratings until I've reread a book, so I rated it 3 stars and it's gonna stay 3 stars until I reread it. But yeah, even now when I think about this book, the only thing I can think is, what the hell was that? What did I experience while reading that? Vita Nostra is not an easy read at all. If you're familiar with Russian literature, part of the difficulty of reading it is similar to how difficult it is to read Russian literature. The writing style just demands hard work from you. You have to be dedicated to continue reading and get to the ending. But once you do, and everything is laid out in front of you, you do feel accomplished. But honestly, reading Anna Karenina, nothing on the headache that was reading Vita Nostra. And to be fair, nothing on how entertaining Vita Nostra was. Anna Karenina, boring to me. In Vita Nostra, the students are, broken, trying to understand what they're even being taught. And by God, these authors are going to make sure that you're broken alongside them. I could see the consequences of the lessons and of the punishments if students failed a test or something like that, and they were brutal and horrific, but the lessons themselves, I didn't truly grasp them until the very end. And once I did, I felt like my mind was blown. If you don't mind a challenge, I genuinely think this book is worth reading, if only for the realization of what these lessons are in the end. I wouldn't say that this is a book for people who need fully fledged out characters or relationship dynamics. There are relationships at play here, and you do see characters growing and changing, but I just don't think it's enough for it to carry the whole book if that's the thing that draws you to books the most. It's also not a heart-racing, plot-heavy book either. I would describe it more as like a cold sweat and tension. I found it very suspenseful, and I think the authors are very good at inducing panic and fear within you at the same time that the characters are also feeling scared. Vita Nostra is a book for people who love atmosphere, who love worlds and concepts that are so different it's hard to imagine. I think if you're a fan of Mona Awad books, you might like this. It's not as easy to read or as character-focused as her stories tend to be, but it is just as weird, and it does have some body horror elements like some of her books do. For reasons that I cannot and will not explain, if you liked Babel by R.F. Kuang and you didn't mind reading through what some people called like the boring linguistic lectures of that book, there's a 50-50 shot you might like Vita Nostra. Maybe not even 50-50, maybe like 60-30 leaning that you won't like it, but there is some slight overlap. Vita Nostra is a frustrating book that's hard to explain or even understand. And I'm not going to lie and say that it's not kind of difficult to get through it to begin with. But if you make it to the end, there is a chance that the ending will be so worth it to you that you will still be thinking about the book 4 years later, like I am. I finished this book and was genuinely so upset to find out that the second book wasn't translated into English yet, because I had that realization at the end of what everything had been about the whole time, and I was like, you cannot end it there. Every other book on this list should be easier to explain. The next book I'm going to talk about is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. In this, one of our main characters, Leah, was a member of a deep sea mission that went catastrophically wrong and resulted in them being stranded at the bottom of the ocean. When Leah makes it back to her wife Miri, it's clear that she's come back changed. And so Miri is struggling to hold on to some semblance of a normal life and onto the woman that she loves, even while Leah continues to change beyond recognition. This was a 5-star book for me, which I've seen marketed as horror, and don't get me wrong, it is horror, but it's more like a touch of horror than what I think they market it as. I didn't find it scary at all, which for me was a disappointment at first because I went into it really wanting to be scared. I picked this specifically because I have a fear of the deep sea, and so I thought this premise would terrify me. While Our Wives Under the Sea does have horror aspects, and there's some really horrific things that happen to Leah as she transforms, I would not sell this as a horror story as much as I would sell it as a grief story, using horror as a metaphor. If I were to just describe the events that happen in this book, it would sound weird and it would sound unsettling, but in reality, the experience of it was just more of a quiet story. We get dual POVs where Leah's chapters take place while she is stranded at the bottom of the ocean during her mission, and then Miri's chapters take place after Leah has come home. The balance of the chapters skews more towards Miri, if I'm remembering correctly, but even in Leah's chapters, where you would assume it would be, in the thick of it, it wasn't really scary beyond an abstract sense. It's less that it scared me personally, and more like I recognized that it would be absolutely terrifying for the characters. It wasn't what I was looking for, and I would still really love a super scary deep sea story, but Our Wives Under the Sea was perfect for what it was trying to do, which was be a metaphor and a story about losing someone you love and learning to let go of them. The book was full of beautiful and sad prose. Miri's chapters are full of introspection and recollection of early moments in their relationship that are just so melancholic and nostalgic and romantic and so sad, because Miri is trying to adjust to the person her wife is becoming and to hold on to her the whole time. If you like quieter, slow burn books, if you like kind of a vignette style of writing, this might be a book for you. If you like emotions seen through a weird lens, because again, this does have horror, then this is worth a shot. And if you like stories of grief, absolutely read this. Also, this isn't really like a one-to-one comparison, but I recently reread Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and I definitely think there's overlap in people who would like both books. They feel like 2 points on a spectrum and not even opposite ends of the spectrum either. If you'd like to hear more about Our Wives Under the Sea, there is a long review on Goodreads from a user called S.Penkovich that I think was an eloquent description of what the book was like. I'll make sure to link their Goodreads profile in the description so that you can find the review. Highly recommend reading it. The next book is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is about June, who is a flopping author and so bitter that her friend Athena is a literary star. June is convinced that the reason is because the publishing industry doesn't want stories from white people like her, and that the only reason Athena was treated specially is because she's Asian. But one night, June is the only witness to a freak accident that results in Athena's death, and she takes that opportunity to steal Athena's unpublished magnum opus, a historical novel about Chinese laborers. June passes the work off as her own while also adopting a ethnically ambiguous name and persona to market it. I also gave this book 5 stars, but I do want to say that with the caveat that it's not the most solid 5 stars ever, because it's not a super impressive book by any means, but it is so damn entertaining. I just love being in the minds of characters who are delusional, and June is so delusional. It was equally as frustrating as it was funny to be in her head, and I think I literally exclaimed out loud on multiple occasions. Her audacity was crazy. I know a lot of people who have criticized this book in the past did so because we were expecting a scathing and insightful commentary on the publishing industry, and this didn't deliver that. That criticism is entirely correct and it's entirely valid. I understand why people are upset about that. Luckily, I had already heard those criticisms, so I didn't go into Yellowface expecting that, and so I wasn't disappointed by the lack of it. This book does not analyze the publishing industry or even book Twitter drama on any level deeper than anyone who's already kind of in the book sphere would already already know. I just went into this hoping for a fun time, and that's exactly what I got. Being in June's head was like watching a train wreck about to happen. I want to believe that she was a very one-dimensional character, that there's no way people in real life actually think that the publishing industry is racist towards white people, or that it makes sense to pass themselves off as Asian, or that they're doing nothing wrong with this whole thing. I want to believe that. However, it is absolutely a level of entitlement that I can believe exists. June was so entrenched in her own delusion of the kind of grandeur she deserved that she did come across as one-dimensional, but to be honest, I'm sure there are some people who are genuinely that self-centered. Again, I love being in the heads of people like that as long as there is catharsis at the end, because I cannot stand an author who drives me to insanity with their audacity and then doesn't give me any kind of satisfying consequence for them at the end. I reread Under the Dome by Stephen King recently, and there is an antagonist POV, similar delusions of grandeur, similar nasty, entitled personality, but what I disliked about it is that there was no cracking of that character's self-perceived righteousness. I felt like that was really lacking. And in Yellowface, I will admit that I found the ending rushed and lacking. It wasn't as satisfying as I hoped it would be, but what I will say is that it was satisfying enough because June does experience kind of an unraveling throughout the book. And we do get to see her struggle to maintain this facade that she's created and to receive rightful criticism for it from other people. I've read R.F. Kuang's Babel and I've read the Poppy War trilogy. This book is not as well researched or as impressive as any of those books. It's probably her most surface level consumer friendly book that she has. So I understand why some people might be disappointed by it because it's not the level of depth that readers want from her, but it's a funny quick read. I think it's the most rereadable of her books, to be honest. Super easy, you can fly through it and you can have a good time. The next book is Confessions by Kane Minato, which I think I give 4 stars to. Another quick, very entertaining read. This is a Japanese translated revenge story, which starts with middle school teacher Yuko resigning after the death of her 4-year-old daughter. It's her last day of class and she's delivering one last lecture when she reveals 2 of her students murdered her daughter. She knows exactly who they are and she's already enacted her revenge against them. First things first, her revenge plot, absolutely batshit crazy. I went into this book knowing nothing at all, and that's what I would recommend you do, because when we found out what she had done, I was flabbergasted. There must be so many obvious jump cuts in this because I am just shifting around a lot. It's a fidgety kind of day for me, sorry. It's not the gory kind of revenge, and that's all I'll say about it. If you know that you have triggers though, I would look into it further or ask me in the comments, I'll happily share there. Because while not gory, her revenge plot is absolutely gonna be triggering for some people. I found this book gripping from the very first page. As the title suggests, this is written in a confessions style, so it's as if the character is monologuing to you. And we don't only get Yuko's monologue or her POV chapter either, we also get chapters from both of the boys that she accused of murdering her daughter, and I believe other characters as well. It's been a while since I've read this, so I might be misremembering that. But the confession style of this book does make it perfect for an audiobook format. I'm really not an audiobook person. I just find it hard to keep a hold of the storyline and really process what's happening in it. Not at all a problem with this. The fact that I am suggesting this as an audiobook should tell you how good the audiobook experience was. I was just so invested in the story that I didn't lose focus for a single second. I was inventing up chores to do just so that I could keep listening to the audiobook. Every time you think you know what Yuko's revenge was, there's another layer, another ripple effect to cement the revenge that's revealed. And every time you think you know what happened, you get another perspective that puts things a little differently, that shows you that things aren't quite what they seemed either. It's interesting and suspenseful for sure, but I do have a bit of a critique here. There's overlap in events recounted by different POVs. So while some POVs add more context, add more information to an event you've already heard about, in some cases it gets a little bit too repetitive. And that's a huge reason why this book is 4 stars instead of 5 stars. To be fair, Confessions is a pretty short book, so it's not like you have to sit through a slog of repetitive events anyway. The book is just not that long for it to actually drive you crazy. The other reason that this book got 4 stars instead of 5 stars is because I felt the ending was a little bit rushed, like it cut off a little too abruptly. I could have done with maybe one more chapter, but that also could have been me being greedy and just wanting the story to continue. I also want to give a huge shout out to the translator for this book as well, Steven Snyder. I've read quite a bit of Japanese translated literature, and this is one of the most well done translations I've read so far. Funnily enough, I read The Memory Police, I want to say almost a year after I read Confessions, and I was so impressed by that translation that I took the time to look up the translator in the middle of me reading it, and come to find out Steven Snyder translated that one as well. So at the moment, I guess you could say that they are my my favorite Japanese translator. I always go into Japanese books knowing that the writing is going to come across as kind of stilted and detached. I don't know what it is, but there's something about the translation from Japanese to English that results in an almost clinical distance between the reader and the narrator, or at least that's just my experience of the books that I've read. But with Confessions and The Memory Police as well, it's the most natural translations I've read yet. They feel fuller and more alive than other Japanese translations I've read. And we are on to the last book, Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, which I gave 5 stars to. It was so good. The way I've always seen A Dowry of Blood marketed is as a loose reimagining of Dracula that centers around his multiple consorts as they fall in love with each other. And while that isn't necessarily untrue, I do think it gives readers kind of a false hope for what they'll get out of this book. This story is told by Dracula's first bride, Constanta, from when she is first found and turned by Dracula through their relationship across different centuries and different countries as Dracula gets a second wife and then also a husband. And while the consorts do initially start as rivals for Dracula's affections and then eventually find comfort in each other, this story is more about Constanta's relationship with Dracula. More specifically about how Constanta slowly realizes just how abusive and toxic their relationship is. I thought I would love this book because it was so hyped up on BookTube, but I thought I was going to love it for different reasons than what I ended up loving it for. I mean, people really focused a lot on the polyamory, and it was great. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a well-balanced relationship, and I really enjoyed seeing them kind of adjust to each other, and then subsequently come to rely on each other when dealing with the controlling and violent nature of their shared husband. Some people will probably find their relationship dynamics, especially in the beginning, kind of strange, but to be fair, their whole vampirism and the many centuries and the shared husband all kind of add layers that I'm sure impact their perceptions of each other, of their relationships, and how they should interact with each other within those relationships. For me, the consorts had a relationship that was both prickly and so tender, and I did love them. But I loved this book more for its exploration of the abusive relationship and how Constanta disentangled it. It was fascinating to see her struggle between genuinely loving her husband and understanding and realizing that despite that love, he was hurting her. And so she had to make a choice between her love for him and her own freedom and safety. I would say that this book is almost a character study. I don't necessarily know really what a character study is and where the boundaries of that are, but I would call this a character study, and that's not something that I typically love, but the writing here was just so lyrical and beautiful. It has some writing that I think some people would call purple prose, but like here's a bit of my own confession. I love purple prose when done well, when writers clearly enjoy playing with words and combining them in a way that is just pleasing to the ear. I don't know, I love it. I love purple prose. And the prose here was beautiful and darkly romantic and at times dramatic, all perfect for a Dracula reimagining. The gothic tone was done well, in my opinion. I found the atmosphere both clear and consistent. I don't typically or always love gothic literature because I feel like it drags its feet too much, and it's just, I don't know, gothic literature to me feels thick and heavy, and I cannot explain that any better at this moment. But basically, I think gothic is better served in small doses, and A Dowry of Blood is short enough that it doesn't needlessly drag. It's actually so short that I think I finished it in a day because I couldn't put it down. Another part of what can annoy me with some gothic literature is when it feels like the intent for the plot is for it to be action-packed or wild or something like that, but the tone of gothic makes it lose its impact or feel like nothing is happening. Plot is not really the main focus in A Dowry of Blood, I would say, although it does happen and it's worth waiting for, but because it's not the main focus, it doesn't feel like the book fails to deliver on what it promises. But again, like I said, there is plot. Constanta does have to adjust to the new consorts, and then she has to make a choice regarding her relationship with Dracula, which will necessarily impact the relationship that the other consorts have with him. So she also has to deal with the consequences of her choices and see what that means for her and for her other lovers. And of course, Dracula is Dracula, and they're all vampires, and there is violence in this story, although not a lot, not any more than you would expect from a vampire story. A heads up for some people who are particular about the POVs that you read, this story is written in second person as letters or a confession that Constanta is writing directly to Dracula, which results in some wonderful foreshadowing and some recollections from her, two things which I personally love. I loved this book. It made me look up S.T. Gibson's bibliography because I want to read every other thing that this person has written. So there you have it, the top 5 books that I read during my hiatus. I tried making this list a top 10 instead of top 5, but wow. I did not have some good reading years there. A lot of the books that I read were like at best kind of mid. I do want to give some shout outs though to another 5 honorable mentions, let's say. So let's just go down that list. We've got Know My Name by Chanel Miller, very well done, harrowing memoir. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Piranesi by Susanna Clark. The Alice in Borderland manga series by Haru Asu. Love a Death Games premise, and I was very fixated on the Netflix adaptation for a while there. And then Notes on an Execution by Danya Kafka, which I did give 5 stars, but it just didn't have the longevity of the books that I talked about today. So yeah, I could have gotten to 10 in this list, but it just didn't feel as genuine as focusing on these 5 books that just stood out to me so much more. Let me know if you've read any of my top 5 or any of the honorable mentions, if you liked them, if you didn't, or let me know some of your recent favorites. Thanks for watching, friends. I will see you in the next one.